Hey everyone! Tonight we're diving into a tale that's less about shining armor and heroic quests, and more about the gritty, tedious, and often downright miserable reality of being a medieval knight. You've seen the movies, gallant warriors charging into battle, swords gleaming, banners flying, maidens swooning. But let's strip away the Hollywood gloss and get real. Being a medieval knight wasn't all epic tournaments and dragon-slaying glory. Most of the time, it was boring, painful, and a logistical nightmare that would make you wish for a desk job. So, settle in, dim the lights, and let's take a slow, sleepy journey through the not-so-glamorous life of a knight in the Middle Ages. Trust me, by the end, you'll be thanking your lucky stars for modern mattresses and indoor plumbing. Picture this. It's 1340, and you've just been dubbed a knight. Congratulations! You're now part of an elite warrior class, a symbol of chivalry, a defender of the realm. Sounds thrilling, right? Except, the moment your sword taps your shoulder, reality hits like a rusty mace to the face. First off, knighthood isn't something you just stumble into. It's not like you woke up one day and thought, "Hey, I'll be a knight." No, this is a lifelong grind, and it starts way before you're old enough to grow a beard. Let's rewind to your childhood, because that's where the boredom begins. If you're born into a noble family, because let's be clear, knighthood is a rich kid's game, you're not out playing tag with the peasant kids. By age 7, you're shipped off to another lord's castle to start your training as a page. Your days are filled with chores that sound like they were designed to crush your soul. You're fetching water, cleaning boots, serving meals, and scrubbing floors. Occasionally, you get to hold a sword, but it's mostly for show and it's heavier than you are. You're not learning to fight yet. You're learning to obey. The castle's knights and lords bark orders, and you scamper around like a medieval intern, hoping you don't spill wine on someone important. It's repetitive, it's exhausting, and it's about as exciting as watching grass grow in a muddy courtyard. By your teens, you graduate to squire, which sounds like a promotion but is really just a fancier version of servitude. Now you're cleaning armor, grooming horses, and following your knight around like a glorified personal assistant. You carry his shield, sharpen his sword, and help him into his armor, which, spoiler alert, is not a quick process. It's like trying to dress a grumpy toddler in a 70-pound metal onesie. You're also training, finally, but it's not the heroic sword fights you imagined. It's endless drills. Swing a wooden sword at a post, dodge a blow, fall in the mud, repeat. Your muscles ache, your hands blister, and your knight mentor critiques your form like he's judging a baking contest. Most days, you're too tired to dream of glory. You just want to sleep without a horse stepping on your foot. This training drags on for years. Years. You're not even close to knighthood until your late teens or early 20s, and even then, it's not guaranteed. You need a lord to sponsor you, and that means impressing someone who's probably too busy feasting or arguing over land rights to notice your effort. If you're lucky, you get dubbed in a ceremony that's less epic moment and more awkward formality. You kneel, say some vows about honor and loyalty, and maybe get a sword or a pair of spurs. No confetti, no parade, just a pat on the back and a reminder that you now owe your lord everything. Welcome to knighthood. The real work and the real boredom is just beginning. So you're a knight now. You've got a horse, a sword, and a shiny new title. Time to slay dragons and rescue damsels, right? Wrong. Dragons are a myth, and damsels aren't exactly lining up to be saved. Most of your time as a knight is spent not in battle, but in the soul-crushing monotony of feudal life. Your primary job is to serve your lord, and that often means hanging around his castle, waiting for something to happen. Spoiler, it usually doesn't. Days blend into weeks of standing guard, patrolling empty fields, or sitting through endless banquets where you're expected to nod politely while your lord drones on about his latest feud with the neighbor. It's like being stuck in a meeting that never ends, except you're wearing 50 pounds of chainmail and your chair is a wooden bench that feels like a torture device. When you're not standing around looking intimidating, you're maintaining your gear. Armor doesn't clean itself, and it's not like you've got a squire for every task now that you're a knight. Chainmail, made of thousands of tiny metal rings, is a magnet for rust and dirt. You spend hours scrubbing it with sand or vinegar, trying not to slice your fingers on the links. Plate armor, if you're fancy enough to afford it, is even worse. Every dent needs hammering out, every strap needs checking, and every buckle needs polishing. Your sword? You're sharpening it constantly because a dull blade is a death sentence, if you ever get to use it. Most knights go months, even years, without seeing real combat. Your weapons are more likely to be used for chopping firewood than fighting enemies. Then there's your horse, your most valuable asset. Knights without horses are just heavily armed pedestrians, so you spend an obscene amount of time caring for your steed. Feeding, grooming, checking hooves for stones, mucking out stalls. It's not glamorous, it's grunt work. Horses are expensive, finicky, and prone to injury, so you're constantly paranoid about your mount going lame. Lose your horse and you're basically out of a job. No pressure. When you're not babysitting your equipment or your horse, you're training. Again, you thought the squire days were over? Nope. Knights have to stay in fighting shape, which means more drills, more sparring, and more falling into the mud. You practice with a lance, aiming at a quinton, a spinning target that smacks you with a sandbag if you miss. Spoiler, you miss a lot. Your shoulders scream, your back aches, and your squire is probably snickering behind your back. Tournaments sound fun in stories, but they're rare, expensive, and often just for show. Most of your combat training is you versus a wooden dummy, swinging until your arms feel like they're gonna fall off. It's not heroic. It's repetitive, sweaty, and mind-numbingly dull. And let's talk about the castle you're living in. It's not a fairy tale palace with golden chandeliers. It's a cold, drafty stone box with no central heating and barely any furniture. Your bed is a straw mattress, just like the peasants, except maybe you've got a slightly less scratchy blanket. The walls are damp, the floors are cold, and the air smells like smoke and mildew. You're lucky if you've got a window, but it's probably just a slit that lets in more rain than light. Privacy? Forget it. You're sharing space with other knights, squires, and servants, all snoring, farting, and scratching their fleas. Sleep isn't restful. It's just a break from the monotony. And even then, you're probably woken up by a rooster or a drunken brawl in the courtyard. Food? Don't get your hopes up. You're eating better than the peasants, but that's a low bar. Breakfast is bread, hard, chewy, and possibly baked with sawdust if the harvest was bad. Lunch and dinner are variations of pottage, a stew of grains, vegetables, and maybe a scrap of meat if the Lord's feeling generous. Spices are for the ultra-rich, so your food tastes like boiled dirt with a side of grit. You're washing it down with ale because water is a health hazard, but the ale's weak and tastes like it was brewed in a sock. You're not starving, but you're not exactly living the gourmet life either. Every meal feels like a chore, and you're always vaguely hungry, because knights need to stay lean for combat, not fat for feasting. And then there's the waiting. So much waiting. You're a knight, trained for war, but wars are rare. Most conflicts are small-scale skirmishes over land disputes or petty feuds, and even those might not involve you. Your lord might send you to guard a bridge or escort a caravan, which sounds exciting until you realize it's just hours of riding through mud, swatting flies, and hoping bandits don't show up. Spoiler, they usually don't. You're more likely to die of boredom than a sword wound. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and you're stuck in a cycle of drills, chores, and waiting for a battle that might never come. This is knighthood. 90% tedium, 10% terror, and 100% discomfort. All right, let's pick up where we left off in the muddy, monotonous world of a medieval knight. You're now fully aware that knighthood isn't the glamorous adventure you'd hoped for. It's a grind of endless chores, rusty armor, and a diet that makes you question your life choices. But let's dive deeper into the day-to-day drudgery and explore why even the moments that sound exciting, like tournaments or battles, often turn out to be more painful than heroic. Buckle up, or rather, strap on your ill-fitting armor, because the reality of being a knight is about to get even less romantic. Let's start with the physical toll of being a knight, because if the boredom doesn't break you, your body just might. Wearing armor all day isn't like slipping into a superhero suit. Chainmail, which most knights wore before plate armor became common, is a heavy, clinking curtain of metal rings that weighs anywhere from 30 to 50 pounds. It's like carrying a small child on your back, except the child is made of iron and chafes your shoulders raw. Moving in it is exhausting. Every step feels like wading through molasses, and forget about running gracefully. Plate armor, which starts showing up more in the later Middle Ages, is even worse. A full suit can weigh 60 to 100 pounds, and it's not exactly tailored for comfort. The joints pinch, the straps dig into your skin, and the helmet restricts your vision to a narrow slit, making you feel like you're peering through a mailbox. You're sweating buckets, even in winter, because there's no ventilation, just a suffocating cocoon of metal. And taking it off? That's a two-person job, minimum, and you're praying your squire doesn't fumble the buckles. Underneath that armor, you're not exactly living the spa life. Your clothes are coarse wool or linen, itchy and rarely washed. You're lucky if you've got a linen undershirt. Most knights just deal with the chafe. Bathing? That's a luxury, not a routine. You'd need to haul water from a well, heat it over a fire, and hope no one else in the castle claims your tub first. Most knights just live with the grime, scratching their way through life with fleas and lice as constant companions. The combination of heavy armor, scratchy clothes, and no deodorant means you're a walking ecosystem of itch and stench. Your skin is raw, your scalp is a battlefield, and a rash is just another Tuesday. Now, let's talk about injuries, because knighthood is a full-contact sport, even in training. Those endless drills with swords, lances, and shields aren't just boring, they're dangerous. One bad swing and you've got a bruised rib or a dislocated shoulder. Sparring with other knights or squires often ends with cuts, sprains, or worse, because practice weapons are still heavy and blunt enough to crack bones. Falling off your horse during lance practice? That's a concussion waiting to happen, and helmets don't exactly come with modern padding. If you're unlucky, a poorly aimed blow could break your arm or knock out a tooth, and good luck finding a competent doctor. Medieval medicine is a gamble. Think leeches, prayers, and a barber surgeon who's more enthusiastic than skilled. A simple infection from a cut could turn deadly, because antibiotics are still a few centuries away. Every training session is a reminder that your body is one misstep from becoming a medieval medical case study. When you're not injuring yourself in training, you're injuring yourself just living. Riding a horse for hours in armor is brutal on your back and hips. The saddle chafes, your knees ache, and your spine feels like it's being compressed by a medieval torture device. Long patrols or marches mean blisters, saddle sores, and joints that creak like an old gate. Even sitting still at a banquet can be painful. Those wooden benches aren't ergonomic, and sitting in armor for hours leaves you stiff and sore. By your mid-20s, you're moving like a much older man, your body a roadmap of scars, bruises, and poorly healed bones. Knighthood is less about glory and more about enduring a constant state of physical discomfort. Let's shift gears to the social side of being a knight, because it's not all physical pain. There's plenty of emotional and social drudgery to go around. As a knight, you're part of the feudal system, which means you're not exactly free to live your best life. You owe everything to your lord, your time, your loyalty, your sword arm. In return, he might grant you a small plot of land, but don't expect much gratitude. Your lord sees you as a tool, not a friend. You're expected to be at his beck and call, whether that's guarding his castle, escorting his wife to a neighboring estate, or settling some petty dispute with a rival lord over who owns a particular sheep-filled hillside. These tasks aren't thrilling. They're tedious, and they come with zero job security. Displease your lord, and you could lose your land, your status, or worse, your head. The feudal hierarchy is a pressure cooker, and you're always one misstep from being demoted to glorified peasant. Socially, you're stuck in a weird middle ground. You're above the common folk, but you're not exactly dining with the king. Other knights are your peers, but they're also your competition. Everyone's vying for the lord's favor, hoping for a better land grant or a shot at marrying into a wealthier family. It's a constant game of one-upmanship, where every banquet or hunting trip is a chance to impress, or to screw up and become the castle's laughingstock. You're expected to embody chivalry, which means being courteous, brave, and honorable. But in practice, it's a lot of fake smiles and posturing while you try not to offend someone who outranks you. The court is a minefield of egos, and you're always tiptoeing to avoid a social explosion. And let's not forget the church, because in the Middle Ages, it's everywhere. As a knight, you're expected to be a model Christian, attending Mass, confessing sins, and avoiding anything that might get you labeled a heretic. Skip a service, and you're risking whispers of impiety. Eat meat on a Friday. That's a sin, and the local priest will make sure everyone knows it. The church isn't just a spiritual guide. It's a social enforcer, and knights are held to a higher standard because you're supposed to be a shining example of virtue. In reality, you're just trying to stay awake during a 3-hour Latin sermon while your stomach growls and your armor pinches your ribs. Then there's the myth of courtly love, which sounds romantic but is mostly a headache. In theory, you're supposed to dedicate yourself to a noble lady, writing poems, performing deeds in her honor, and gazing longingly from afar. In practice, it's a lot of awkward flirting with someone you can't actually pursue, because she's usually married to your lord or someone equally powerful. Misjudge the situation, and you're not just rejected, you're exiled or worse. Courtly love is less about romance and more about performing for an audience of judgmental nobles who are always looking for gossip. It's exhausting, and most knights would rather be scrubbing chainmail than composing another sappy ode to Lady Eleanor's unattainable grace. Even the rare moments of excitement come with a catch. Tournaments, for example, are the medieval equivalent of a sporting event, where knights show off their skills in jousting or melee combat. Sounds fun, right? Except they're expensive to enter. You need to pay for your own gear, travel, and entry fees, which could bankrupt a lesser knight. They're also dangerous. A well-aimed lance can crack your ribs or knock you unconscious, and the prize money rarely covers the cost of a broken arm or a lame horse. Plus, tournaments are often scripted. Nobles don't like losing to upstarts, so the winner is usually preordained. You're not fighting for glory. You're performing for the crowd, and the crowd doesn't care if you limp away with a concussion. So, as you sit in the castle courtyard, polishing your sword for the 3rd time this week, you realize knighthood is a trap. You signed up for adventure, but what you got was a lifetime of sore muscles, social stress, and endless waiting for a battle that might never come. The songs about knights make it sound like you're living a legend, but most days you're just trying to survive the boredom and the back pain. Alright, we're back in the saddle, literally and figuratively, as we continue our slog through the less than chivalrous life of a medieval knight. You're already bruised, bored, and itching under your armor, stuck in a cycle of endless chores and social tightropes. But let's zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture. The financial and logistical nightmares that make knighthood feel like a second job you never signed up for. If you thought the physical and social grind was bad, wait until you see the price tag and paperwork that come with being a knight. Spoiler alert, it's not all about swinging a sword. It's about surviving a system that seems designed to keep you broke and busy. First, let's talk money, because knighthood is expensive. You might think being a knight comes with a nice paycheck or at least some sweet castle perks, but unless you're born into serious wealth, you're basically a glorified freelancer with a sword. The costs start early and never stop. As a squire, your family had to pay for your training, which meant footing the bill for food, lodging, and equipment while you were fetching ale and polishing boots. Once you're a knight, those costs skyrocket. Your armor, weapons, and horse aren't just tools. They're status symbols, and they come with a price tag that could bankrupt a small village. A decent suit of chainmail could cost the equivalent of a year's income for a peasant. And if you're splurging on plate armor later in the Middle Ages, you're looking at the price of a modern luxury car. Swords, lances, shields, saddles, every piece of gear is handcrafted, and there's no medieval Amazon for bulk discounts. Your horse is the real budget killer. A good war horse, trained to charge into battle without bolting, costs more than most knights earn in a decade. You need at least one, preferably two, because horses get injured, go lame, or just die at the worst possible times. Feeding them is another expense. Hay and grain aren't cheap, especially in bad harvest years, and you're not sharing your lord's fancy stables. If your horse dies, you're not just out of money. You're out of a job, because a knight without a mount is about as useful as a squire without thumbs. Some knights end up in debt just to keep their stables stocked, borrowing from shady moneylenders who charge interest rates that make modern credit cards look generous. Then there's the upkeep. Armor needs constant repair. Every dent, rust spot, or broken strap costs money to fix. Blacksmiths and armorers don't work for free, and they know knights are desperate to stay battle ready. Your sword needs sharpening, your shield needs repainting, and your lance snaps like a twig if you hit a target wrong. Even your clothes, those scratchy-wool tunics, wear out fast, and replacing them means shelling out for more fabric and a tailor who probably overcharges because you're a knight. If you're lucky, your lord might cover some of these costs, but most expect you to foot the bill yourself. Feudal loyalty doesn't come with an expense account. And don't forget taxes, because yes, knights pay those too. You owe your lord a portion of your income, usually in the form of crops or livestock from your land, if you're lucky enough to have any. Then there's the church demanding tithes, 10% of everything you produce, whether it's grain, wool, or chickens. Miss a payment, and you're not just in debt, you're risking your reputation, your land, or even excommunication, which is a social death sentence in the Middle Ages. On top of that, you might owe scutage, a tax paid to avoid military service if your lord calls you to war, but you can't or won't go. It's like paying to skip a mandatory meeting, except the meeting involves arrows and dysentery. Speaking of war, let's talk about what happens when you're actually called to fight, because it's not the glorious charge you imagine. Most knights owe their lord 40 days of military service per year, a feudal obligation that sounds straightforward but is a logistical nightmare. First, you need to get to the battlefield, which means packing up your armor, weapons, horse, and supplies, then riding for days or weeks through mud, rain, and bandit-infested roads. You're not traveling light, your gear weighs a ton, and you're probably dragging along a squire or two to carry it. If you're campaigning far from home, you need to bring food because foraging in enemy territory is a gamble, and the locals aren't exactly rolling out the welcome mat. You're lucky if you don't starve before you even see the enemy. When you finally reach the battlefield, it's less epic clash and more hurry up and wait. Armies spend days, sometimes weeks, just staring at each other across a field, negotiating, or waiting for supplies. You're camped in a damp tent, eating the same stale bread and watery ale you've been choking down for weeks. Dysentery is more of a threat than enemy swords, and the camp smells like a mix of unwashed bodies, horse manure, and despair. If a battle does happen, it's chaotic, brutal, and over quickly, but we'll get to that later. For now, most of your war is spent sitting around, sharpening your sword for the 100th time, and praying you don't catch a fever from the camp latrine. Back home, your life isn't much better. If you're one of the lucky knights who gets a fief, a piece of land to manage, you're basically a landlord with a sword. Sounds nice, but it's a headache. You're responsible for collecting rent from peasants who are perpetually broke, settling disputes over who stole whose pig, and making sure the crops don't fail. If they do, you're the one answering to your lord, not the peasants. You're also expected to maintain the land, which means repairing fences, clearing fields, and dealing with floods or droughts. It's less noble warrior and more overworked farmer with a title. If you don't have a fief, you're a household knight, living in your lord's castle and entirely dependent on his generosity. That means eating his leftovers, sleeping in his drafty halls, and hoping he doesn't kick you out when he's in a bad mood. The paperwork doesn't end there. The Middle Ages love their bureaucracy, and knights aren't exempt. You're signing contracts, swearing oaths, and keeping track of debts, taxes, and obligations. If you're lucky, you can read and write, but many knights rely on clerks or monks, which means paying someone else to handle your affairs. Every transaction feels like a negotiation, and every mistake could cost you your land or your status. It's not just fighting that defines knighthood. It's the constant hustle to stay afloat in a system that's rigged against anyone who isn't a high-ranking noble. Even your downtime isn't relaxing. Hunting, a favorite pastime for knights, sounds fun until you realize it's less about sport and more about survival. You're chasing deer or boar through dense forests, dodging branches, and hoping you don't break your neck falling off your horse. Plus, hunting is often a lord's privilege, so if you're caught poaching on the wrong land, you're facing fines or worse. Feasts and banquets, they're not parties, they're work. You're expected to charm the lord's guests, avoid political traps, and not drink too much ale while still keeping up with the toasts. It's like networking, but with worse food and higher stakes. So, as you trudge back to the castle after another day of mucking stalls, balancing budgets, and dodging dysentery, you realize knighthood isn't a calling, it's a contract. You signed up for glory, but what you got was a lifetime of bills, blisters, and bureaucratic headaches. The songs about knights never mention the part where you're haggling with a blacksmith or praying your horse doesn't eat your entire savings. But that's the medieval dream. Less shining armor, more endless grind. We're deep in the trenches of medieval knighthood now, wading through the mud of financial strain, logistical headaches, and a life that's more about paperwork than pageantry. You're a knight, but instead of basking in glory, you're juggling debts, dodging dysentery, and praying your horse doesn't keel over. Let's wrap up this sleepy saga by diving into the one thing you've been trained for: battle, and why even that, the supposed pinnacle of a knight's life, is often a miserable, chaotic letdown. Then we'll reflect on why knighthood, for all its myths, was a grind that left most knights longing for a simpler life. So, grab a lumpy straw mattress, dim the torchlight, and let's trudge through the final stretch of this unglamorous tale. You've spent years training, sharpening your sword, and lugging around armor that feels like a portable prison. Your whole life has been building toward one thing: battle. In the stories, it's the moment where knights shine, charging on horseback, banners waving, enemies scattering before your lance. But the reality of medieval warfare is far less poetic. If you're lucky or unlucky enough to see combat, it's not a cinematic spectacle. It's a brutal, sweaty, terrifying mess that's over before you know it, leaving you exhausted, injured, or worse. Let's set the scene. After weeks of marching to the battlefield, sleeping in a leaky tent, and eating moldy bread, you're finally facing the enemy. You're in full armor, which is great for protection but terrible for everything else. Your helmet's visor limits your vision to a foggy slit, your chainmail or plate armor weighs you down like a sack of bricks, and you're already drenched in sweat before the fighting starts. Your horse is skittish, sensing the chaos, and you're gripping your lance so tightly your hands cramp. The battlefield is a cacophony of shouting, clanging metal, and the thump of hooves. You can barely hear your commander's orders over the din, and half the time, there's no clear plan anyway. Medieval battles are often a free-for-all where strategy dissolves into survival. If you're a cavalry knight, your job is to charge. Sounds thrilling, right? Except it's a gamble with terrible odds. You're aiming a 12-foot lance at a moving target while galloping at full speed, praying you hit their shield or chest and not their horse or a stray foot soldier. A good hit might unhorse your opponent, earning you ransom money if they're noble and you capture them alive. But a bad hit or a miss could send you crashing to the ground, where you're a sitting duck in 70 pounds of armor. Falling off your horse is no joke. The impact can break bones, and if you're stunned, you're at the mercy of enemy infantry who aren't exactly playing by chivalric rules. They'll aim for the gaps in your armor, armpits, groin, or neck with daggers or clubs, and no amount of training prepares you for the panic of being pinned under a dead horse while someone tries to stab you through a visor. If you're not charging, you're in the melee, hacking and slashing with your sword or mace. This isn't a duel with elegant footwork. It's a brawl in a crowd. You're swinging at anything that moves, hoping it's not one of your own men. Armor helps, but it's not invincible. A heavy mace can dent plate, crush chainmail, or break your arm through a shield. Arrows, especially from longbows or crossbows, can pierce weaker armor or find gaps. And you're always one unlucky shot from a slow, septic death. The ground is slick with mud, blood, and worse, and it's easy to slip or trip over a body. Battles rarely last more than an hour or two. Exhaustion and casualties force one side to break, but those minutes feel like an eternity. You're not thinking about honor or glory. You're thinking about staying alive. And the aftermath? It's grim. If you survive, you're likely injured. Cuts, bruises, or broken bones are standard. There's no field hospital, just a barber surgeon with a dirty knife and a bottle of wine for anesthesia. Infection is a bigger killer than swords, and even a shallow wound can turn fatal if it festers. If you're captured, you might be ransomed, but that means sitting in a dank dungeon until your family or lord coughs up the cash. If they can't pay, you're stuck, possibly for years. If you're on the winning side, you might get some loot, enemy armor, weapons, or a share of the plunder, but it's rarely enough to cover the cost of the campaign. Most knights come home poorer than when they left, assuming they come home at all. Even the victory isn't satisfying. You're not riding back to a hero's welcome. You're limping home, nursing wounds, and worrying about how to replace your damaged gear or dead horse. Your lord might thank you, but he's more likely to demand you stay ready for the next fight. The peasants you're protecting don't care. They're too busy trying to survive the taxes and requisitions that fund your lord's wars. And the songs sung about the battle? They're for the nobles, not you. Your name won't be remembered unless you're a high-ranking knight with a fancy crest. For most, it's just another day of pain and paperwork. This brings us to the heart of why knighthood was such a grind. The myth of the knight, noble, heroic, invincible, is a fantasy spun by poets and troubadours who never swung a sword or scrubbed rust-off chainmail. The reality is a life of relentless duty, where every day tests your endurance, your wallet, and your sanity. You're not free. You're bound by oaths to your lord, your church, and a code of chivalry that's more about appearances than ideals. You're not rich. You're scraping by, pouring every penny into gear and horses that break faster than you do. You're not a hero. You're a cog in a feudal machine, valued only as long as you're useful. What's worse is the psychological toll. You're trained for war, but wars are rare, so you spend most of your life waiting, wondering if you'll ever prove yourself. When battle finally comes, it's not the glorious moment you imagined. It's a brutal, fleeting nightmare that leaves you shaken and scarred. The constant pressure to uphold your honor, impress your lord, and avoid social missteps is exhausting. You're surrounded by people, squires, knights, nobles, but you're isolated, trapped in a role that demands perfection but rewards you with pain. Modern soldiers talk about the boredom and stress of military life. Medieval knights lived it, without the benefit of therapy or a weekend off. As you sit by the fire in your lord's drafty hall, staring at a bowl of lukewarm pottage, you can't help but wonder if it's worth it. The songs about knighthood promised adventure, but all you've got is a bad back, a mountain of debt, and a squire who keeps losing your spurs. You dream of a life where you don't have to polish armor or bow to a lord who barely knows your name. Maybe the peasants, with their simple lives of plowing fields and dodging taxes, have it better. At least they don't have to worry about lance practice or ransom demands. And so, as the fire crackles and the castle settles into another cold, restless night, you close your eyes, hoping for a dream that's better than the reality of knighthood. The Middle Ages will remember knights as legends, but you know the truth. Being a knight wasn't about shining armor or epic quests. It was about surviving a world that demanded everything and gave little in return. Sleep well, because tomorrow it's back to the grind. Another day of mud, rust, and the endless, aching weight of being a knight. We've reached the end of our long, weary march through the unglamorous life of a medieval knight, but let's not call it quits just yet. You're still sitting by that flickering fire, spooning lukewarm pottage, and wondering how your life became an endless cycle of rust, debt, and disappointment. Let's take one final, sleepy stroll through the aftermath of knighthood. What happens when the battles, if they ever come, are over, and you're left to face the twilight of your career? We'll explore the challenges of aging as a knight, the fleeting hope of retirement, and why the legacy of knighthood is more about myths than memories. Settle in, because this last chapter is as quiet and sobering as a castle at midnight. You're in your 30s now, maybe pushing 40 if you've been lucky enough to dodge arrows, infections, and bad falls. By medieval standards, you're old. Your body feels older still. Years of hauling armor, swinging swords, and riding horses have left you with a patchwork of aches and scars. Your knees creak from countless hours in the saddle. Your shoulders protest every time you lift a shield, and your back hasn't forgiven you for that one bad lance hit a decade ago. Training, once a grueling but achievable routine, is now a test of willpower. Younger knights and squires outpace you in the practice yard, their blows landing harder, their reflexes sharper. You're not obsolete yet, but you feel the clock ticking. In a world that values strength and speed, aging is a quiet humiliation. Your role as a knight doesn't get easier with time. If anything, the pressure mounts. If you've managed to secure a fief, you're still playing landlord, haggling with peasants over rents and praying for a good harvest to keep your lord happy. The paperwork hasn't slowed down. Taxes, tithes, and debts pile up, and every year feels like a tighter squeeze. If you're a household knight, relying on your lord's generosity, your position is even shakier. Younger, cheaper knights are always ready to take your place, and lords aren't known for their sentimentality. You're expected to keep up the same duties: patrols, escorts, the occasional skirmish, despite your body begging for a break. Slacking off isn't an option. One mistake, and you're out, replaced by some eager 20-year-old with a shiny new sword. Combat, if it comes, is no longer a thrill, it's a gamble you're less equipped to win. Your experience gives you an edge in tactics, but your stamina and strength are fading. A younger opponent can outlast you in a melee, and a poorly timed charge could be your last. You've seen friends die in battle, not from heroic last stands, but from simple bad luck. A stray arrow, a slip in the mud, a wound that wouldn't heal. The thought of dying for a lord's petty feud over a border village feels less noble and more pointless with every passing year. You're not fighting for glory anymore. You're fighting to avoid disgrace. Retirement, if you can call it that, is a distant dream. The Middle Ages don't have pensions or 401(k)s. If you're wealthy, a rare breed among knights, you might own enough land to live comfortably, renting fields to peasants and sipping ale in a manor house. But most knights aren't so lucky. Without a fief, your options are grim. You might stay in your lord's service as long as your body holds out, transitioning to lighter duties like training squires or managing the castle guard. It's less physically demanding but no less tedious, and the pay, if any, barely covers your costs. Some knights turn to the church, joining a monastery or becoming a lay brother, trading their sword for a rosary. It's a quiet life, but it means giving up the world you've known, and the monks aren't exactly throwing welcome parties for grizzled warriors. If you're unlucky, you end up a hedge knight, a lantless, lordless wanderer scraping by on odd jobs. You might guard a merchant's caravan, fight in a minor lord skirmish, or beg for hospitality at a castle, but it's a step above begging. Your armor is patched, your horse is half lame, and your reputation is all you have left. Hedge knights are the medieval equivalent of a gig worker, living hand to mouth, always one bad day from destitution. The songs don't talk about these knights, but they're more common than the shining heroes of legend. Your legacy, if you have one, is fleeting. Unless you're a high-ranking noble with a family crest and a chronicler on payroll, your name won't echo through history. The peasants you taxed, the squires you trained, the lords you served, they'll forget you as soon as you're gone. Your deeds, if they're remembered at all, will be folded into someone else's story, a footnote in a lord's victory or a line in a troubadour's song. The chivalric code you tried to live by, honor, courage, loyalty, feels like a cruel joke when you're counting your last coins or nursing a wound that won't heal. Knighthood promised immortality, but all it gave you was a lifetime of grind and a grave that no one visits. And yet, there's a strange, stubborn pride in it all. You've survived a world that chews up most men by 30. You've faced battles, even if they were rare and messy. You've carried the weight of armor, oaths, and expectations, and you're still here, battered but breathing. Maybe that's the real story of knighthood. Not the glory, but the endurance. The quiet, dogged will to keep going, even when the world offers little in return. It's not heroic, but it's human. As you lie on your straw mattress, the castle silent except for the distant howl of a wolf, you let your mind drift. You think of the boy you were, wide-eyed and dreaming of dragons and damsels. You think of the man you became, scarred and weary, polishing swords and paying debts. The fire's gone out, and the cold seeps into your bones, but you're too tired to care. Tomorrow, you'll rise, strap on your armor, and face another day of the grind. Not because you want to, but because it's who you are. A knight in a world that doesn't need heroes, just survivors. We've reached the end of our long, weary march through the unglamorous life of a medieval knight, but let's not call it quits just yet. You're still sitting by that flickering fire, spooning lukewarm pottage, and wondering how your life became an endless cycle of rust, debt, and disappointment. Let's take one final, sleepy stroll through the aftermath of knighthood. What happens when the battles, if they ever come, are over, and you're left to face the twilight of your career? We'll explore the challenges of aging as a knight, the fleeting hope of retirement, and why the legacy of knighthood is more about myths than memories. Settle in, because this last chapter is as quiet and sobering as a castle at midnight. You're in your 30s now, maybe pushing 40 if you've been lucky enough to dodge arrows, infections, and bad falls. By medieval standards, you're old. Your body feels older still. Years of hauling armor, swinging swords, and riding horses have left you with a patchwork of aches and scars. Your knees creak from countless hours in the saddle. Your shoulders protest every time you lift a shield. And your back hasn't forgiven you for that one bad lance hit a decade ago. Training, once a grueling but achievable routine, is now a test of willpower. Younger knights and squires outpace you in the practice yard, their blows landing harder, their reflexes sharper. You're not obsolete yet, but you feel the clock ticking. In a world that values strength and speed, aging is a quiet humiliation. Your role as a knight doesn't get easier with time. If anything, the pressure mounts. If you've managed to secure a fief, you're still playing landlord, haggling with peasants over rents and praying for a good harvest to keep your lord happy. The paperwork hasn't slowed down. Taxes, tithes, and debts pile up, and every year feels like a tighter squeeze. If you're a household knight, relying on your lord's generosity, your position is even shakier. Younger, cheaper knights are always ready to take your place, and lords aren't known for their sentimentality. You're expected to keep up the same duties: patrols, escorts, the occasional skirmish, despite your body begging for a break. Slacking off isn't an option. One mistake, and you're out, replaced by some eager 20-year-old with a shiny new sword. Combat, if it comes, is no longer a thrill, it's a gamble you're less equipped to win. Your experience gives you an edge in tactics, but your stamina and strength are fading. A younger opponent can outlast you in a melee, and a poorly timed charge could be your last. You've seen friends die in battle, not from heroic last stands, but from simple bad luck. A stray arrow, a slip in the mud, a wound that wouldn't heal. The thought of dying for a lord's petty feud over a border village feels less noble and more pointless with every passing year. You're not fighting for glory anymore. You're fighting to avoid disgrace. Retirement, if you can call it that, is a distant dream. The Middle Ages don't have pensions or 401(k)s. If you're wealthy, a rare breed among knights, you might own enough land to live comfortably, renting fields to peasants and sipping ale in a manor house. But most knights aren't so lucky. Without a fief, your options are grim. You might stay in your lord's service as long as your body holds out, transitioning to lighter duties like training squires or managing the castle guard. It's less physically demanding but no less tedious, and the pay, if any, barely covers your costs. Some knights turn to the church, joining a monastery or becoming a lay brother, trading their sword for a rosary. It's a quiet life, but it means giving up the world you've known, and the monks aren't exactly throwing welcome parties for grizzled warriors. If you're unlucky, you end up a hedge knight, a lantless, lordless wanderer scraping by on odd jobs. You might guard a merchant's caravan, fight in a minor lord skirmish, or beg for hospitality at a castle, but it's a step above begging. Your armor is patched, your horse is half lame, and your reputation is all you have left. Hedge knights are the medieval equivalent of a gig worker, living hand to mouth, always one bad day from destitution. The songs don't talk about these knights, but they're more common than the shining heroes of legend. Your legacy, if you have one, is fleeting. Unless you're a high-ranking noble with a family crest and a chronicler on payroll, your name won't echo through history. The peasants you taxed, the squires you trained, the lords you served, they'll forget you as soon as you're gone. Your deeds, if they're remembered at all, will be folded into someone else's story, a footnote in a lord's victory or a line in a troubadour's song. The chivalric code you tried to live by, honor, courage, loyalty, feels like a cruel joke when you're counting your last coins or nursing a wound that won't heal. Knighthood promised immortality, but all it gave you was a lifetime of grind and a grave that no one visits. And yet, there's a strange, stubborn pride in it all. You've survived a world that chews up most men by 30. You've faced battles, even if they were rare and messy. You've carried the weight of armor, oaths, and expectations, and you're still here, battered but breathing. Maybe that's the real story of knighthood. Not the glory, but the endurance. The quiet, dogged will to keep going, even when the world offers little in return. It's not heroic, but it's human. As you lie on your straw mattress, the castle silent except for the distant howl of a wolf, you let your mind drift. You think of the boy you were, wide-eyed and dreaming of dragons and damsels. You think of the man you became, scarred and weary, polishing swords and paying debts. The fire's gone out, and the cold seeps into your bones, but you're too tired to care. Tomorrow, you'll rise, strap on your armor, and face another day of the grind. Not because you want to, but because it's who you are. A knight in a world that doesn't need heroes, just survivors. And with that, your eyes grow heavy, the weight of the day pulling you towards sleep. The Middle Ages fade, the castle walls blur, and you slip into a dream where the armor is lighter, the battles are kinder, and the pottage, just once, tastes like something worth eating. Good night, night. You've earned your rest. The morning is gray and damp, the kind of day that makes your old wounds ache before you even rise. You're past 40 now, closer to 50 if you squint at the years gone by. The castle is quieter still, its halls echoing with the ghosts of livelier times. Your armor, once a second skin, hangs on a rack in the corner, gathering dust. You haven't worn it in months, not since your last patrol left you gasping for breath. Today, you'll shuffle through another day of routine, but it's the weight of memory that drags at you now. Memories of battles fought, friends lost, and a life that never quite lived up to its promise. Let's linger in this quiet moment, where the past feels heavier than any sword. You start the day, as always, breaking your fast with a crust of bread and a sip of sour ale. The great hall is nearly empty, save for a few servants sweeping ashes from the hearth. Your lord is away, scheming at some distant court, and the castle feels like a hollow shell without his presence. Your duties are light, checking the granary, settling a dispute between two peasants over a stray cow, but they feel heavier than they should. Every step reminds you of your age, every task a reminder of how little has changed. You're still serving, still scraping by, still waiting for a purpose that never seems to arrive. Memory creeps in unbidden as you walk the castle walls, your limp more pronounced in the morning chill. You think of your first battle decades ago, when fear and excitement burned in equal measure. You were young then, your armor bright, your horse strong. You unhorsed a rival knight, earning a nod from your lord and a small purse of silver. Felt like the start of something grand, but the battles that followed blurred together. Muddy fields, screams, the stench of blood and fear. You lost friends to swords, to fever, to bad luck. Their faces haunt you, clearer than the faces of the living. You wonder if they'd recognize the man you've become, stooped and weary, more clerk than warrior. The squires you train don't help. They're boys, barely old enough to shave, their heads full of songs about knights and quests. You try to teach them the truth, that knighthood is sweat and sacrifice, not glory, but they don't listen. They see your scars and limp as relics of a bygone age, not warnings. You tell them of the battle where your shield arm broke, the bone jutting through skin, and how you rode home in agony, only to find your lord had already forgotten the fight. They nod politely, but their eyes wander to the practice yard, where younger knights spar with a vigor you can't match. You wonder if you were ever that naive, that blind to the grind. The world outside is no comfort. News trickles in from travelers and merchants, tales of a changing Europe. The Black Death, though years passed, still casts a long shadow. Villages lie empty, fields untended, and the survivors demand wages that make lords grumble. Peasant revolts flare up, angry mobs burning manors and defying the old order. You've heard of knights riding out to crush these uprisings, cutting down men armed with pitchforks in desperation. It's not honorable, not chivalric, but it's work, and some knights take it. You wonder if you'd have the stomach for it, or if you'd rather let the world burn than raise your sword against starving farmers. At night, you sit by the fire, mending a torn cloak with clumsy stitches. The castle is still. The only sounds the crackle of flames and the distant hoot of an owl. You think of the vows you took when you were dubbed: loyalty to your lord, defense of the faith, protection of the weak. They sounded noble then, but now they feel like chains. Your lord cares more for gold than loyalty. The church demands your tithes but offers no solace. And the weak, well, you've taxed them, fought them, ignored their pleas. You've tried to be a good knight, but the world doesn't make it easy. Maybe it never did. As you bank the fire and climb into bed, the straw creaking beneath you, you let the memories fade. Tomorrow will be another day of small tasks, small struggles, small defeats. You're not sure how many more you have left, but you'll face them as you always have, one aching step at a time. Sleep comes slowly, a heavy blanket that smothers the past but never quite erases it. Another day dawns, the sky a dull slate that mirrors your mood. You're old now, undeniably so, your hair streaked with gray, your hands gnarled like the oak outside the castle gate. The world has moved on, but you're still here, tethered to duties that feel both pointless and inescapable. Your armor remains untouched, a silent monument to a life you no longer live. Today, you'll perform the last tasks of a knight, not with a sword, but with a quill, a word, a weary step. Let's walk through this fading world, where your final duties are as quiet as the dust settling in the castle's forgotten corners. You rise slowly, your joints protesting as you pull on a worn tunic. The castle is waking, but it's a subdued affair. Servants shuffle through their chores, and the few remaining knights speak in low tones. Your lord has returned, but he's a stranger now, a younger man who inherited the title when his father died. He barely knows your name, addressing you as Old Sir, with a mix of pity and indifference. Your role has shrunk to the edges of his court. You oversee the stables, count sacks of grain, or sit in on disputes too petty for his attention. It's not knighthood as you knew it, but it's all you have left. Your morning task is to check the stables, ensuring the horses are fed and the stalls clean. The smell of hay and manure is familiar, almost comforting, but the work is harder now. You lean heavily on a pitchfork, your breath short as you shovel straw. The stable boys, barely older than squires, watch you with a mix of respect and impatience. They're quicker, stronger, and you feel their eyes on your trembling hands. You used to ride these horses into battle, your lance steady, your heart fierce. Now, you're lucky to mount one without wincing. Your old warhorse, a loyal beast who carried you through a dozen campaigns, died years ago. The new horses don't know you, and you don't trust them. By noon, you're called to the Lord's Hall to witness a contract, a land deal between your lord and a neighboring baron. You stand in the background, your presence more ceremonial than necessary. The clerk reads the terms in halting Latin, and you nod when asked, though no one cares for your opinion. Your signature, scratched with a quill that slips in your grip, is a formality. You're a relic, a living seal of approval for a lord who values your title more than your wisdom. The banquet that follows is a blur of noise and faces, nobles you don't recognize, dishes you can't afford. You eat sparingly, your stomach uneasy, and slip away before the toasts begin. In the afternoon, you find yourself in the chapel, a small stone room lit by flickering candles. The priest, a dour man with ink-stained fingers, is preparing for evening mass. You kneel, not out of devotion but habit, your knees grinding against the floor. You pray for strength, for forgiveness, for something to make sense of the years behind you. The vows of knighthood echo in your mind. Honor, loyalty, faith, but they feel distant, like words from a language you've forgotten. You've served, fought, endured. Was it enough? The priest doesn't answer, and neither does God. As evening falls, you're tasked with training a squire, a gangly boy who fumbles his sword like it's a broom. You correct his stance, your voice hoarse but patient, and show him how to parry without dropping his shield. He's eager but clumsy, and you see yourself in his awkwardness. All those years ago, you tell him to practice, to respect the blade, to fear the cost of failure. He nods, but you know he won't understand until he's lived it. Until his hands blister, his friends die, his dreams fade. You send him to the yard and sit on a bench, catching your breath, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Night finds you in your chamber, a cramped space barely warmer than the stables. You light a single candle and count your coins. A few pennies, enough for a week's bread if you're frugal. Your debts are smaller now, but so is your income. You've sold your spare armor, your second horse, even the silver spurs you earned at your dubbing. What's left is just enough to keep you from begging. You lie down, the straw mattress as unforgiving as ever, and stare at the ceiling. The castle is quiet, the world beyond it quieter still. You wonder how much longer you can go on and what comes next. Sleep comes slowly, heavy, pulling you into a dreamless void. Tomorrow you'll rise and do it all again. Stable, hall, chapel, yard. Not because you choose to, but because it's all you know. The night you were is gone, but the duties remain, binding you to a life that's more memory than meaning. The seasons blur, and you're old, undeniably so, your body a thing held together by habit and grit. The castle, once your world, feels like a prison, its walls closing in with every labored breath. You're no longer a knight in any sense that matters. Your sword is sold, your armor a memory, your duties reduced to the barest gestures of service. The church, ever present in your life, offers one final refuge, a monastery, where you might trade your past for peace. Let slow, somber road, where your night's life fades. You wake with a cough, a deep, rattling thing that's been with you since last winter. The straw dressing is damp, the air thick with mildew. You dress in a simple robe, the coarse fabric a far cry from the chainmail you wore. Your chamber is bare, stripped of anything valuable. You've sold everything to pay your debts, to buy a place in the monastery nearby. The abbot, a stern but fair man, has agreed to take you in as a lay brother, not a monk, but a servant of the faith allowed to live among them. It's not salvation, but it's something, a way to end your days without a beggar's shame. Your final task in the castle is to settle your affairs. You meet with a clerk who counts your last coins and records your debts as cleared. You sign the contract, your hands steadier than you expect, and hand over the keys to your old life. A rusted key to a chest long empty, a token of your knighthood. The Lord isn't there, he's away, and the younger knights don't glance their way. You're invisible, a shadow slipping out the gate with a sack of clothes and a loaf for bread for the journey. The road to the monastery is a daze, and your limp makes it longer. The path winds through fields, past villages where peasants toil. The sky is overcast, the air thick with promise of rain. You pass a merchant's cart, a shepherd with his flock. They're bleating a sheep, a reminder of your life. Heard, always moving, never free. You walk slow, remembering your memories of the dubbing, battles, knights, lords, squires you're trained for. It's heavy, and you carry it. The monastery appears as dusk settles, its stone walls stark against the fading light. The bells ring, a low, steady call like a heartbeat. You knock, and a monk lets you in. The abbot greets you with a nod, his eyes kind but distant. He shows you to a cell, a stone room with a straw pallet and a wooden cross. Your duties will be simple. Tend the garden, clean the chapel, pray with the brothers. No swords, no lords, no debts, just quiet work. That night, you kneel for prayers, the Latin chants washing over you. You don't understand the words, but the rhythm soothes, easing the cough and the ache in your soul. You pray for the men you killed, for the friends you lost, for the boy who dreamed of knighthood. The monks sing, the candles flicker, and you feel peace, fragile but real. You sleep on the pallet, the straw no softer, but the dreams are kinder. Less blood, more light, a faint glow that promises rest. You've settled into the monastery now, your days governed by the toll of bells and the quiet labor of faith. The world of knighthood, its clang of steel, its oaths and debts, is a distant echo, like a song half remembered. You're old, frail, your cough a constant companion. But there's a strange calm in this new life. The monastery is no paradise. Its walls are cold, its rules strict, but it's a refuge, a place where the grind of knighthood has no hold. Let's drift through your days here, where time moves slowly, marked by prayer and the soft rustle of leaves in the cloister garden. You wake before dawn, roused by the bell for matins. The cell is dark, the air sharp with frost. You rise, your bones aching, and pull on your rough woolen robe. The other brothers, their faces shadowed under hoods, shuffle to the chapel. You follow, your steps slow but steady, and take your place in the back. The chants begin, a low hum that fills the stone vault. You don't know the words, but you bow your head, letting the sound carry you. It's not the faith you once swore to defend, all fire and crusade. It's quieter, humbler, a plea for mercy in a world that's shown you little. After prayers, you're sent to the garden, your morning task. The plot is small, a patch of herbs and vegetables tucked behind the cloister. You kneel in the dirt, your hands clumsy as you pull weeds or trim rosemary. The work is hard on your joints, but it's honest, free of the castle's politics and the battlefield's blood. A younger monk works beside you, silent but kind, occasionally handing you a trowel when your fingers fail. You think of the fields you once rode through, the peasants you taxed, the harvests you counted. This garden is different. It feeds the brothers, not a lord's ambition, and it asks nothing but your effort. By midday, the bell calls you to the refectory for a meal of bread, pottage, and a slice of apple from the orchard. You eat in silence, the only sound a monk reading from scripture. The food is plain, but it's steady, a luxury you didn't always have in the castle's lean years. You chew slowly, your few remaining teeth aching, and listen to the words of a saint you've heard 100 times. They speak of humility, of surrendering the self, and you wonder if you're finally learning what that means. Knighthood was a life of striving, glory for honor, for survival. Glory, here you're asked to be nothing but be, to let the world go. The afternoon is for cleaning the chapel, a task that suits your fading strength. You polish the wooden pews, sweep the floor, replace the candles that have burned low. The work is repetitive, like sharpening a sword or scrubbing chainmail, but it soothes you. The chapel is quiet, the air heavy with wax and incense. You pause at the altar, a simple stone slab, and trace the carved cross with a trembling finger. You think of the churches you've seen, grand cathedrals, battlefield tents, village hovels, and the faith that's carried you through you. It's not the same faith now, but it's enough to keep you here, one prayer at a time. Evening brings vespers, another round of chants, another moment of surrender. The brothers' voices are stronger now, yours a faint echo, but you join in, your cough quieter in the candlelight. After, you sit in the cloister watching the stars through the arches. The night is cold, but you're wrapped in a blanket, a gift from the abbot. You think of nights spent in muddy camps, in drafty castles, in fear of bandits or battles. This here is different. Stillness, safety, a moment to breathe. You wonder if this is what you fought for all those years ago, or if it's just another duty in disguise. Sleep comes easier now, the palate familiar, the bell's a lullaby that drowns out the past. You dream sometimes, of horses, of a lance in your hand, of a boy with stars in your eyes, but they're faint, fading like smoke. You're not a knight anymore, not a warrior, not a servant of lords. You're just a man, living out his days in the shadow of a cross, waiting for the final bell to call you home. Your days in the monastery have settled into a rhythm, a quiet pulse that carries you toward the end. You're ancient by medieval standards, your body a frail husk, your cough a constant shadow. The bells still call, the prayers still rise, but you feel the world slipping away, like sand through your fingers. This is your final chapter, where the knight you were dissolves into the man you are, a man seeking peace in the shadow of eternity. Let's walk through your last days, where every breath is a farewell, every prayer a reckoning. You wake to the matins bell, but you don't rise today. The fever that's been lurking in your chest has tightened its grip, each breath a shallow, burning effort. The brother who tends the sick brings you a cup of water and a damp cloth for your brow. Your cell is dim, the cross on the wall a faint outline in the dawn. You lie still, listening to the chants from the chapel, their voices carrying you back to a life you barely recognize. The sword, the horse, the battlefield, they're ghosts now as distant as the stars. The abbot visits, his face kind but grave. He sits by your pallet, speaks of God's mercy, of a soul prepared. You try to listen, but your mind wanders to the vows you broke, the ones you kept, the lives you touched or took. You ask if you've done enough, if a night's sins can be washed clean. He takes your hand, says faith is enough, but his eyes hold no promises. You nod, because it's all you can do, and let his words fade into the hum of your fever. Your tasks are gone, your hands idle now, too weak to hold a trowel or a rosary. The monks care for you, their hands gentle as they lift you. Change your bedding, spoon broth you can't swallow. You're grateful, but guilt gnaws at you. You've always been the strong one, the one who carried the load. Now you're the load, a burden on men who owe you nothing. You try to thank them, but your voice is a rasp, lost in the cough that shakes your frame. Memories come and go, unmoored from time. You're a boy again, running through a meadow, your father's shield too heavy for your arms. You're a squire, polishing armor, dreaming of glory. You're a knight, lance in hand, charging through the mud, fear and fire in your heart. Then you're here, old and broken, the weight of years pressing down like a stone. You see faces, your mother, your first squire, the enemy knight you spared, his eyes wide with surprise. They fade, and you're alone, the monastery silent but for the bells, tolling like a heartbeat slowing down. By evening, the fever peaks, and you know the end is near. The brothers gather around your bed, their candles casting a soft glow. They sing, a hymn of light and rest, their voices weaving through the fog in your mind. You try to join them, to whisper a prayer, but your lips are still. You think of the monastery garden, its herbs growing under your care, of the chapel's cross, its promise carved in stone. You think of knighthood, not the songs, not the battles, but the quiet moments, the times you showed mercy, the times you endured. The final bell rings, calling the brothers to Compline. Its sound is deep, resonant, a note that fills the world and carries you with it. The light fades, the voices soften, and you let go, slipping into a darkness that's not cold, not empty, but warm, like a hearth you've been searching for all your life. The night is gone, the duty's done, the debt's forgiven. Sleep eternal, now good night, you found your rest.